Reuters over here.
Yes, Adrian Croft from Reuters, Secretary General. There have been reports recently that President Karzai has introduced some new conditions into the NATO Status of Forces Agreement. I wonder if you can comment on that and on the progress of the negotiations on this SOFA, please.
I'm not going to comment on details in those negotiations. We have actually seen substantial progress in the negotiations on a NATO Status of Forces Agreement. However, it's also clear that we can't finalize those negotiations until we have seen a signature on the bilateral security agreement between the United States and Afghanistan. However, I do believe that at the end of the day, we will get the necessary legal framework in place to deploy a NATO train, advise, assist mission after 2014, because a lot is at stake, also for, and not least, for Afghanistan. But of course, time is of the essence. And for planning reasons, I hope that we will get a clarification as soon as possible.
German television.
Kai Niklas from German television ZDF. Mr. Rasmussen, two questions, if you allow. First one, the EU is engaged now in Mali and Central Africa. The EU partners of France just said they would support France and widen their mission over there. Do you see any NATO role there too, or is that excluded? And are you very satisfied that EU is involved there in Central Africa? That is my first question. And the second one to the Ukraine. In Bucharest, well, a lot of years, many years ago now, we had the ambitions of Ukraine and Georgia to become a NATO member, or at least to get the stage before membership. What can NATO do? Does NATO have any influence on the people that are in charge in Ukraine at the moment? Is it only diplomacy, or what are your means of intervention?
First, on Mali and the Central African Republic. First of all, I would like to commend France for swift and determined action in both countries. I think that French-led operation, or these French-led operations, are essential in order to prevent terrorist groups from advancing and to save lives. I also appreciate that other NATO allies have decided to support France in those essential operations. And definitely I appreciate that the European Union has also decided to engage. As I said in my introduction, I would very much like to see Europe and European allies take more responsibility for tasks when it comes to security. So their engagement in these African operations are highly appreciated. There has been no request for a NATO role, but obviously the fact that NATO allies support and assist the French-led operation is due to the fact that NATO allies have learned how to work and operate together within NATO. So in that respect, you might say that NATO plays a role indirectly, but I don't foresee a direct NATO role, neither in Mali nor in the Central African Republic. And on Ukraine, first of all, let me stress that it is for the Ukrainians to decide the future of the country themselves. And I would, in that respect, also remind you that all OSCE member states have subscribed to that principle in the OSCE Charter for European Security, which was adopted in 1999. In that charter, it's clearly stated that each and every state has a right to be free to choose its alliance affiliation itself. We adhere to that principle, and we would expect all other OSCE member states to do the same. So that's important for me to stress, that it's for the Ukrainian people to decide the future of Ukraine itself. Having said that, we have a partnership between Ukraine and NATO within a special NATO-Ukraine Commission. Within that partnership, we have an ongoing dialogue on practical military cooperation and other kinds of practical cooperation, as well as a dialogue on political principles. And it is within that framework that we continue to express our concerns as regards the development in Ukraine. That's why we strongly condemn violence. That's why we urge the government to engage in a constructive dialogue and find peaceful solutions to the conflict. And that's why we urge the Ukrainian government to live up to fundamental democratic principles, including the right to assemble freely and the right to express your views freely in a peaceful manner. So I think what we can do is to use that partnership framework to express our views, but it's for the Ukrainians to decide their future themselves.
I know there are questions over here. Right now we'll just work around, so rest assured we'll get over there. GeoTV Pakistan.
Khalid Hamid Farooqi from Geo Television Pakistan. Secretary General, you mentioned in this report that in May last year, the military-to-military cooperation is strengthened with Pakistan. Can you elaborate on that? And as you know, the Pakistan military has launched undeclared operation in Waziristan and agency areas against Taliban after the aftermath of continuous attack on public spaces. And will you invite new Army Chief General Rahil Sharif, who took over from Kayani, to a May meeting of Defense of Chief Staff NATO? Thank you.
On the latter, we haven't made any decisions in that respect, but obviously I won't exclude that, because as you mentioned, we have had such excellent dialogue also with high-ranking military people in the past. I met with the Pakistani Prime Minister in September at the margins of the UN General Assembly in New York, and we agreed that we should engage in a high-level dialogue between NATO and Pakistan. Now, as regards military engagement, what we are mentioning is the fact that we have seen, I would say, improved relations between, or improved and intensified engagement between ISAF and Pakistani military leaders, including high-level consultations. And I hope to see those consultations and that dialogue continued.
Al Arabiya.
Nurti Fridi from Al Arabiya. Happy New Year, Mr. Secretary General. I have a couple of questions, one on Libya and one on Iran, but in relation with the situation in Afghanistan. On Libya, the government is being challenged every day by armed groups, by militia. My question is how NATO is going to assist the government, which is in a country with a very weak or almost inexistent state institution. And on Iran, do you feel or do you see any new approach from the leadership of Mr. Rouhani regarding the Afghanistan stability and NATO and Afghanistan strategy of, let's say, the withdrawal of international forces? Thank you.
First, on Libya, last year we received, as you know, a request from the Libyan authorities, a request for NATO assistance in building the security sector in Libya. NATO has responded positively. We have established a team, and we are now working with the Libyan authorities to explore further how that assistance could be provided. On Iran, first of all, I welcome the new signals from the Iranian president and also the interim agreement on Iran's nuclear program. I hope that new direction will lead to a breakthrough also when it comes to other regional and international issues. It remains to be seen how that might have an impact on Afghanistan, but obviously it is of vital importance that all Afghanistan's neighbors contribute to security and stability in Afghanistan and in the region, including Iran.
Ritza?
Yes, Mina Skau of the Danish news agency. Now, the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, is going to be in Brussels tomorrow. I was curious to hear whether you have any contacts in that connection, and also if there's anything new to say on old plans for a NATO Russia summit. You have a NATO summit in September in Wales. That might be a good opportunity.
I will meet with Foreign Minister Lavrov tomorrow here at NATO headquarters, and of course we will discuss the work within the NATO Russia Council. As regards the upcoming Wales summit, we have not yet made any decision on partnership events at that summit. So it also remains to be seen whether there will be a NATO Russia summit like the one we had in Lisbon in 2010. Of course, at the end of the day, any meeting must be substance-driven, so I think it's premature to make any assessment or any decision at this stage as regards a NATO-Russia summit. We will see during the coming months whether there is substance or enough substance to actually organize a NATO-Russia summit meeting in Wales.
NPR?
Thank you. Terry Schultz with NPR and CBS. Mr. Secretary General, in the annual report or in the executive summary, you talk about the ISAF progress and say that they continue work to ensure the country never again becomes a safe haven for international terrorists. And on the same day, in Afghanistan, the U.S. is condemning the fact that the government, or maybe I don't want to overstate condemn, let me see their word, anyway, is not happy about the fact that the Afghan government is going to be releasing some detainees that they consider dangerous, and they say they have the blood of NATO troops on their hands. So you've got this situation, you've got another situation where apparently the Karzai government is using the same images as the Taliban in a dossier they're trying to use to justify possibly delaying the BSA signing, or at the very least complaining about the U.S. airstrikes. This man is the ally you've been working with and whose country you've been building up for the past 12 years. Are you concerned, even before we get to the point where there may or may not be a BSA, that the relationship is simply deteriorating at such a rapid rate that there may not be will on the international community side or the Afghan side to continue a TAA mission? There's about 5 questions in there. Good luck. Thank you.
Yeah, but I'll try to consider it as one question, because basically it is about a bilateral U.S.-Afghan relationship. But having said that, I share the concerns. I share the concerns that have been expressed from the United States. As regards the detainees, well, I don't know anything about the reasons why they have been or are about to be released. All I can say is that we would expect Afghanistan to live up to international obligations, including respect the rule of law and due process, and in other words, not to speak too diplomatically, because otherwise, I mean, better deliver a clear message. It wouldn't be justified just to release people based on a political decision. Instead of going through a normal legal process. These people, these detainees, have been accused of being responsible for the killings of U.S. soldiers and allied soldiers and partner servicemen and women. So, of course, it is a matter of concern if they are released merely based on political reasons instead of putting them to trial and go through a normal legal process. That's actually how I see it. And now, in general, it's not a secret that we are faced with some challenges as regards the future legal framework for our presence in Afghanistan. And I have to say that the Afghan political leadership should not underestimate the negative impact it has on the publics and politicians in troop-contributing countries. I also have to add that a lot is at stake in Afghanistan. Because if the legal framework is not put in place in due time, we will end up with what has been called a zero option, which is actually not an option, but an unfortunate outcome, but an inevitable outcome if there is no legal framework. In that case, it is not only a question about our deployment of a trained advisor assist mission to Afghanistan, but I'm concerned that if we don't have troop presence in Afghanistan after 2014, it will also be extremely difficult to generate financial support for sustaining the Afghan security forces. And an Afghan security force of 350,000 soldiers and police goes well beyond the financial capacity of the Afghan government. Simply put, I don't know how the Afghans will be able to finance, to pay salaries to soldiers and police if they don't get any support from the international community. That's what it is about. And on top of that, as you know, the international community has pledged to provide development assistance to Afghanistan, quite an amount of money. And if there is no international presence in Afghanistan after 2014, it might also put that development assistance into jeopardy. That's what is at stake for the Afghan society. It would be a very unfortunate outcome, but actually, that is a risk we are running because of the uncertainty related to the bilateral security agreement and the NATO status of forces agreement. Now, I hope that I have made my position clear.
Japanese media.
Yeah, one thing which is not so clear is about the deadline. And I know you cannot say when you have to get status of forces agreement before you depart by the end of this year. But considering the political schedule, like election in April and the September NATO summit, by what time would you like to see this status force of agreement between NATO and Afghan government? Thank you.
I have to say sooner rather than later, but I would refrain from setting a specific date because it will also depend on a number of factors on the ground. But I think you will appreciate that for planning reasons, we need to know soon whether we are invited or not. I mean, it takes, if we are not invited, if we don't have any legal framework, then we can't stay in Afghanistan after 2014. It is as simple as that. And it takes some time to close down in our bases in Afghanistan. Actually, there are some physical laws you have to respect. It will take some time. And we have to, if there is no status of forces agreement, then we will have to make sure that everything has been withdrawn by the end of this year. It takes several months. So, yeah, if we will discuss it when defense ministers meet here at headquarters by the end of this month. And I think at that time we will have to take some tough decisions.
Final question, Kunan.
Mr. Secretary General, the next summit, one of the topics you will focus is on partnerships. So how do you see the partnerships with the Gulf countries and with the Mediterranean partners developing? Thank you.
We are working with our partners within the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative, that is our Gulf states partners, as well as our partners within the Mediterranean dialogue, that is North Africa and the Middle East. We are consulting with them, and I hope we will be able to launch initiatives that will enhance our partnerships, including those partnerships at the summit. I can't go into details at this stage, but in general, it's our intention to not only maintain, but also further develop our ability to work and operate together with partners. We have learned in Afghanistan, as well as in Kosovo, and during our operation in Libya, how important it is to have partners. It's important from an operational perspective because they contribute in a valuable way to our operations, but it's also important from a political perspective. So this is a reason why, as we draw down our biggest operation ever in Afghanistan, we would like to step up activities that can further develop, maintain and further develop our ability to work and operate together, as we have done in Afghanistan, Kosovo, Libya. So that will be at the core, without going into too many details at this time, because we are still, it's work in progress.
Thank you very much. This concludes this press point on the launch of the Secretary General's annual report for 2013. Secretary General will be available to chat to you in a more informal atmosphere off the record for the next few minutes. Thank you.